Solo Leveling Season 2 just ended, and I wanted to briefly cover everything that happens after the end of the last episode to the end of the series. That being said, I'll be covering just the most important parts, but without going into extreme detail for those who just want a brief overview of what happens without having to read through the entire manhwa. First off, some of the cut content after the events of the Jeju Island arc, like the Americans attempted to recruit Jinwoo with Norma Selner, who supposedly had the ability to increase the abilities of hunters. However, when she tried to do her ability on Jinwoo, she freaked out when she looked into his head and saw something looking back at her. She realized then that Jinwoo does not have a limit. Afterwards, we see Jinwoo's father appear once more, having lured 2 monarchs to him, and clashes with the Frost Monarch. Meanwhile, after reaching level 100, Jinwoo was able to unlock information on the key he got from the cursed loot box, which is actually a key to the Cardanon Temple. He just has to wait 417 days before he can return to the place where it all began. Later on, while debating what the name of his guild should be, Hae-in arrives, requesting to join. However, Bro makes her go through an entrance exam he made up on the spot. First, she faces Igris, but when it's clear he's no match for her, Hae-in demands to face his strongest shadow, which he knows is actually Beru. Unfortunately, after Cha lands a blow on him, Beru stops holding back and is stopped by Jinwoo. He then asks what her real reason for joining is, and it turns out it's just cause she's interested in him. There are better ways of showing that than joining his guild, so he turned her down. Then she remembered the message Min Byung-gu wanted her to tell Jinwoo about being careful with this power. When discussing who they would want for their guild, Jinwoo says he wants someone with their hunter's license, but has no interest in guild activity. Before they can finish their discussion, members from the Knights Guild come to request Jinwoo's assistance in clearing an A-rank dungeon. He accepts with the guild getting 50% of the profit, and shows up at the dungeon the next day. At the same time, there's a dungeon break inside his sister's school, and orcs begin slaughtering students. One of them can sense magic energy on Jinna, and they go for her first when they enter her classroom. However, the magic energy was from the shadow orcs Jinwoo attached to Jinna, and they protect her. Meanwhile, Jinwoo is watching over the Knights Guild as they raid the A-rank dungeon, before he suddenly realizes Jinna is in trouble. He leaves Beru and some ants with the guild, before going straight for the school on Kaisel, since Shadow Exchange is on cooldown. Back at the school, the boss orc comes out the gate, and is much stronger than the shadow orcs. While they're regenerating, he grabs Jinna, believing she's their master, but then drops her in fear when Jinwoo arrives. Once he clears the students out of the room, Jinwoo slaughters the remaining orcs, and tortures their boss for killing so many students. Meanwhile, Beru and the Shadow Ants effortlessly clear the A-rank raid, and the guild members realize that Jinwoo could basically clear on his own. The only issue is that the law states one person alone can't enter a dungeon raid. However, that issue is dealt with when Jinwoo has a meeting with the chairman after leaving the school. Chairman Go is willing to do almost anything to keep Jinwoo in South Korea, so Jinwoo requests that he be able to enter high-ranking gates on his own. Later on, Jinwoo accepts Jinwo's cousin to his guide, while the chairman convinces the Hunters Association higher-ups to accept his request. In order to confirm it's safe, Jinwoo does a public test run, just using his shadows to clear a dungeon, and unsurprisingly they clear it with ease. Not long after, an S-rank gate spawns in the skies above Japan, and they have no choice but to try hiring the S-rank barrier specialist, Yuri Orlov. He demands they pay him $3.6 billion over 1 year, which is like $10 million a day to hold back the gate. Back in Korea, Cha returns to Jinwoo's guild office to pick up her car, and tells him about the message from Byung-gu about his powers and true army. Not long after, it's finally time for Jinwoo to re-enter the double dungeon. This will be his final test and a chance to learn everything about himself and the system. However, the architect uses the system to ban Jinwoo's use of his shadow army. Still, with the strength alone, he is able to beat all the statues, but facing the architect with a 10-minute timer is his true final test. During the difficult battle, the architect reveals that even though you crafted the player breed-in system, he didn't choose Jinwoo, and was against the idea. Even now, he's shocked at Jinwoo's strength, and is eventually taken down, before the timer runs out. Afterwards, the architect shows Jinwoo some of the data stored in his memories, and he sees a war of epic proportions, with millions of monsters fighting against silver soldiers. The monsters were nearly destroyed until they were brought back by the shadows, thanks to the arrival of the original Shadow Monarch. Over time, the Shadow Army began to take over the fight, before Baran brought his own army to attack the shadows. The Shadow Monarch, who Jinwoo sees himself in, eventually dealt with Baran and his army. Meanwhile, the Hunters Guild had come to check out the double dungeon and fought the architect, believing they had to rescue Jinwoo. Of course, they were getting clapped until Jinwoo awakens. The architect is surprised to see Jinwoo still conscious, with a black heart implanted in him. He claims that the Shadow Monarch betrayed him and tries to use the system to stop Jinwoo, but it doesn't work, and his body is destroyed after stating in his prophecy that Jinwoo will die. After making it out the double dungeon with everyone, Jinwoo collapses and is out for 3 whole days. Jinwoo's father, who is suffering from the early effects of the eternal slumber, also learns that Jinwoo's mother is the only known person to wake up. Meanwhile in Japan, Yoryu's barrier is destroyed by a giant that appears from the S-rank gate, and the country falls into chaos. Jinwoo is hesitant to go at first, due to Jinna not wanting him to go. Jinwoo's dad attempts to ask Jinwoo about a cure, but he declines to share any info on it. After that, Jinwoo goes to Japan to deal with the dungeon break, and dispatches his soldiers all across the country to deal with the giants. On the 7th day of the dungeon break, Jinwoo arrived in the destroyed Tokyo, and made quick work of the giant guarding the gate. However, the system didn't say he defeated the dungeon boss, meaning the raid wasn't over yet, and he also wasn't able to extract the shadow. The gate then begins absorbing the mana, even cutting Jinwoo's face in the process. When Jinwoo and Beru enter the gate, they walk through a large hallway and can hear laughter from further down. The source of the laughter is from a changed up giant, claiming he knows what the rulers have planned, and requests to be freed. Jinwoo learns that the rulers are the longtime enemies of the monarchs, and the giant himself is also a monarch. He offers to help Jinwoo against the rulers and monarchs, and tries to convince him by using the Pledge of Trust. Legia explains that the monsters Jinwoo knows of are just stragglers that have become captives of the rulers and have lost their sanity. The silver soldiers Jinwoo saw in his memories are also known as ruler soldiers, and are being sent to prepare their world as a battlefield for war against the monarchs. A world that cannot be destroyed during a rematch between the rulers and monarchs. The fact that Jinwoo has the power of the Shadow Monarch means that the original monarch was a traitor, making them enemies of both sides. Then, when Legia can't say that he will be an ally of humanity, Jinwoo calls off their agreement and kills him. Meanwhile in America, Mrs. Selner goes to the national level hunter, Christopher Reed, and states that she saw a dream of him dying. Reed doesn't want to believe her, but if he did, Mrs. Selner says Jinwoo could protect him. Elsewhere in America, during an after party for clearing their own S-rank dungeon, Thomas Andre is pleased to hear that Jinwoo's guild has been invited to this year's International Guild Conference hosted by the States. Jinwoo also has to leave Japan early when he learns that his father has fallen to the eternal slumber. Jinwoo finally decides to help his friend out and uses the holy water to save his father. As for Chris Reed, he is attacked in his own house by 3 mysterious beings, and when Jinwoo is on a plane back to Korea, Adam White shows him that Reed was already killed by the time they found him. Adam White then reveals that Jinwoo's father is the main culprit, which will be announced at the conference later. There will be a red notice put on him, and Adam just felt it would be wise to let Jinwoo know beforehand. Thomas Andre also makes preparations by making sure Hunter Dong-soo does not mess with Jinwoo, even if he thinks Jinwoo killed his brother, or else there will be consequences. Once in America, Adam takes Jinwoo for a ride and offers the runestone extracted from the most disastrous event in human history, the Kamish raid. However, Jinwoo is more interested in Kamish's well-preserved corpse and requests to see that instead. Once Jinwoo sees the corpse in person, he uses shadow extraction to reawaken Kamish. It works, and Kamish reveals that he was once a servant of the Monarch of Destruction. Unfortunately, Kamish was dead for so long and begins to disappear. He expresses sadness for not being able to be part of the Shadow Army, and warns that there are 4 humans that borrow the powers of rulers before his shadow fails. When Jinwoo catches up with Jin Chol, they realize the Scavenger Guild took Jin-ho somewhere. This leads to an all-out search for Jin-ho, who is being tortured by Dong-soo and his partners. Of course, Jinwoo arrives and pummels Dong-soo before Thomas Andre arrives, requesting Jinwoo to stop. However, Dong-soo was hoping Andre would step in, and since Jinwoo doesn't care anymore, they begin to fight. While Andre puts up a good fight, he's eventually beaten down by Jinwoo, who leaves after killing Dong-soo. He exchanged back to South Korea, where we see Dong-soo is now one of his shadows, named Greed. Jinwoo then returns for the conference with all eyes on him now. It's there where Dr. Belzard explains the recent spikes of gates across the world, and its correlation to the increasingly dense mana being absorbed into the atmosphere. The mana is most concentrated over Seoul, but the cause is still unknown. After that, it's revealed that Christopher Reed was murdered, and the prime suspect is Jinwoo's father. China's 7-star hunter, Liu, then straight up asked what that man's connection to Jinwoo is, and then asks Jinwoo what he would do if hunters hunt him down. If that is indeed his father and not a beast, then Jinwoo states he will protect his family, even if it means turning the world of hunters against him. Afterwards, Liu actually comes over to greet Jinwoo and is glad he put Thomas Andre in his place. Liu hopes the suspect isn't Jinwoo's father, so they won't have to fight. Mrs. Dellner talks with Jinwoo after, revealing a dream where the greatest hunters are being hunted, and requests for him to protect the hunters. Jinwoo eventually agrees and assigns a shadow to all the hunters that were named on a list during the banquet. Thomas Andre also shows up to thank Jinwoo for sparing the members of his guild, and his assistant gets Jinwoo's phone number so they can give him a gift later. At the same time, the Frost Monarch isolates Chairman Go's office in a dimensional gap, and is there for the greatest fragment of brilliant light in his body. Even with his old, broken body, Go is able to briefly fight back before being stabbed through his chest. However, he did manage to break the seal around his office, allowing the Shadow and on him to escape outside. The Frost Monarch chases it down, but it's too late as Jinwoo switches places with it. However, the Frost Monarch isn't ready to risk his life and makes Jinwoo choose between fighting him or saving the chairman. Jinwoo isn't able to stop the Frost Monarch and he escapes, leaving Jinwoo to save the chairman. However, not even Barrow's healing works, and Go stops Jinwoo from using the holy water. In the end, the chairman was at least glad to meet Jinwoo. At his funeral, Jinwoo vows to get revenge on that beast no matter what. As a tear falls down his face, Jinwoo then asks Jinchul to call the reporters over. At the press conference, Jinwoo makes public that the world's best hunters are now being hunted, and that anyone wishing to be protected can come see him in Korea. Meanwhile, the Frost Monarch tries recruiting other monarchs to help him kill the Shadow Monarch before the Monarch of Destruction arrives. Jinchul is also named as the new chairman following Go's death because of his close connection with Jinwoo. Thomas Andre and Leonard Nierman, the strongest in Germany, show up at Jinwoo's guild office. Leonard wants protection while Andre gives Jinwoo daggers, crafted using Kamish's largest tooth. Jinwoo accepts the gift before they both run outside to see the biggest gate ever appear over the city. The biggest gate since Beast started appearing. Jinwoo can't enter the gate, so they're forced to wait for it to open. Plus, ever since that gate appeared, no other gate has shown up anywhere else in the world, and even Andre stays in Korea to witness its opening. As for Jinwoo, he decides to spend some time with Cha a few days before the gate opens. However, that leads to him not being there when the Monarch of Fangs starts attacking civilians. Fortunately, Andre and Leonard manage to hold him off before Jinwoo arrives, yet he's instantly surrounded by the Frost and Plague Monarchs, and even his Shadow Warriors get quickly overwhelmed by their combined forces. Jinwoo does manage to kill the Monarch of Plagues before being stabbed through the chest by the remaining two monarchs. The system registers Jinwoo as having died, but due to having the Black Heart, an unknown skill is activated, ultimately leading to him finally meeting with the original Shadow Monarch. Ashbourne reveals the truth of their history. The Absolute Being created the monarchs, messengers of light, to continuously fight each other for its own enjoyment. As long as the Absolute Being lived, the war would continue. Realizing they were just being used for entertainment, the fragment of brilliant light rebelled. Ashbourne was the only messenger who stood up against the rebels. Although he was no match for them, he learned the Absolute Being had the power of death inside him. Yet, when he returned, the Absolute Being was already dead, and the fragments had now become the rulers. They used the Absolute Being's power to capture Legia and sever the balance of power. The monarchs then had no choice but to work with Ashbourne for a time, and the Shadow Army stood side by side with the Army of Destruction. That power, though, would cause two of the monarchs to betray him, which we saw earlier with Baron. When the rulers arrived, they revealed they wanted to make peace with Ashbourne and asked for forgiveness. Ashbourne didn't know how to handle this and went into Hae-in to plan his revenge against the monarchs, who were defeated by the rulers while he recovered. He then linked up with the Destruction Monarch to find a world where they could build an army outside the ruler's sight. They chose Earth, but when the rulers arrived there, they found it ravaged. They set things straight by using the Cup of Reincarnation to turn back time. Yet, the population kept getting destroyed by the war due to the population's weakness, so the rulers decided to protect humanity by enhancing select individuals who would become known as hunters. They kept using the cup until its power nearly ran out, while the monarchs began using the bodies of humans to arrive on Earth sooner than the rulers expected. Both the Monarch of Destruction and Shadow were too strong though, and the only way Ashbourne could get a suitable host was through the Architect system. Jinwoo was someone who was closest to death, always on the border, which is why Ashbourne chose him. The Architect used the system as a way to make Jinwoo's body able to gradually adapt to Ashbourne's strength, and ultimately, Ashbourne grew fond of Jinwoo. For Ashbourne, he felt he had no place with the rulers, while Jinwoo felt he had no place in a dimension where he could have anything he wanted. Ashbourne is happy to hear that answer and returns to his eternal slumber, while Jinwoo brings himself back to life as an immortal. With Jinwoo gaining access to the full powers of Ashbourne, the system is deleted and all commander level shadows regain their original power, like Igris. Back in reality, Jinwoo's father had been holding off the remaining 2 monarchs on his own until Jinwoo reawakens. The Monarch of Fangs had attempted to go into Hae-in, but Jinwoo goes to slaughter him first, before returning to finally get revenge on the Frost Monarch. Jinwoo then tracks his father down and learns that the rulers had saved him in return for trying to stop the monarchs, including the Shadow Monarch, but then they wanted him to protect the Shadow Monarch instead to stop the other monarchs, as he was the only one who could possibly stop the army of destruction before the rulers arrived. Before his father disappears, he tells Jinwoo he was always thinking about their family, happy he got to at least watch Jinwoo from afar, and apologizes for not being there with his last words. Saddened, or perhaps enraged, Jinwoo shouts that he will make sure the monarchs pay for what happened today. Not long after, the giant gate in the sky opens up, and the real army of shadows arrive, having been passed down to him from Ashbourne. Over 100,000 were absorbed into Jinwoo's shadow army. Jinwoo holds a practice session where Beru challenges Bellion for the Grand Marshal position. He loses and reveals that he just wants to stand by Jinwoo's side. He says Beru can just stand on his left, and he tells Igris he can stand behind him before Igris can even finish his own request. Bellion then begins to tell Jinwoo more about Ashbourne, while at the same time, a gate opens up in China, and the Monarch of Destruction decides it's time to step in. 7 other colossal gates open up across the world, and Jinwoo shows Jinchul the entire history of the past and the war. Jinwoo then holds a meeting where he reveals to the world the Dragon King's 8 armies are coming, and humanity should run away from the gates as far as possible. On the day of their arrival, Jinwoo goes to China, as their gate is the closest to Korea. However, nothing comes out the gate. It turns out the Dragon King focused all his forces on the one gate in Canada, furthest from Jinwoo. With North America being decimated, Jinwoo goes to grab Kamish's runestone and has Mrs. Selner see his future to confirm that his plan to shoulder everything alone will work. Afterwards, he's finally ready to face the Dragon King. First, he splits off his troops to deal with the Steel Monarch, while simultaneously baiting the Dragon King on Terrace to face him one-on-one. Then he retreats back to his troop, who have defeated the Steel Monarch. The Giant King summons nearly his entire army there with the Monarch of Transfiguration, only for Jinwoo to use the ability he got from the runestone to stunlock all of them. Then he takes on Terrace alone to his castle for their final battle. Although Jinwoo doesn't outright win, he is able to stall long enough for the rulers to arrive and finish on Terrace off. In return for his assistance, Jinwoo requests to use the Cup of Reincarnation to turn back time. The higher beings like Antares will return with their memories, but Jinwoo wants to take care of them all on his own, and requests the rulers not to send anyone to Earth. Too many lives were lost, and Jinwoo doesn't mind if everyone forgets his accomplishments, if it means he can have one more chance to fix everything. When Jinwoo wakes up again, he is back to being a middle schooler, with his entire family still together. He allows himself to enjoy a bit of peace as his reward before leaving to go face the monarchs on his own before the gates form. He would spend 27 years in the Dimensional Rift fighting before facing the Dragon King. In Earth time, it's only been 2 years though, and after Jinwoo finally defeated Antares, he returned to Earth in the form of a middle schooler to not cause suspicion. The only person there to greet and congratulate him is an envoy from the rulers, and they go chat at an ice cream shop. While everything has been resolved, the rulers are worried about the effect Jinwoo's powers will have on the world now that doesn't have mana. His existence alone was able to enhance Mrs. Selner's fortune-telling abilities in this world, for example. Jinwoo wants some time to think over what to do now, and the main story of Solo Leveling comes to an end, with Jinwoo realizing that his purpose is now over, and his power may even be toxic to the current world now. He questions if he's someone that's no longer needed, but then sees Chow walk by the shop. If there's one reason for Jinwoo to stay on Earth, it is because the people he loves, the people who love him, and the people who loved him before are all still there. In that case, Jinwoo decides he'll stay and search for other reasons to stay, like being with Hae-in again. That's how Solo Leveling ends. I know this wasn't a fully detailed recap, but I think I was able to cover everything important in a reasonable time. So if you got this far, thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you want to see me cover that blog, or any other Solo Leveling content. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe too. Peace.